Alright, in this tutorial we're going to go back over the introduction to Premiere that we covered previously in class. First window you'll see is this startup window, and I'm simply going to click on New Project. I'll give it a name and direct it into the folder with the content. That's very important. Just like when we work in After Effects, nothing is embedded in the file, it's simply linked. So I'll go ahead and name the file, and I'll direct it to the folder in which the content is that I'm going to be using for this. And then I'll just simply hit OK. The reason I've done that is because once I bring in my video files, the compression codec and size of those files that I used, whether it was my cell phone or a DSLR or an iPad, they will define the timeline for me and the compression codec. So it's pretty easy. Alright, so I've got Premiere up, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import the files that I want to use. And you can start to see the similarities between After Effects and Premiere. The more you use it, the keyboard clicks are quite similar. So I'll go ahead and I'll click down in the lower left-hand corner in the project window. And that's the equivalent of the project window that you're accustomed to in After Effects. I could go up to File, Import, or I can hit Command-I just as if I were in After Effects. And now I can bring my files in. So I'll grab the ones I want to use and click the Import button. Now I can grab and put all of these into the timeline at one time, or I can take them individually. Now the key here is to drag your file into the timeline, because then it will define the dimensions of your movie compression codec and size. So I'll go ahead and I'll just drag all into the timeline and let go, and you can see it's kind of gone in there and lined them up for me consecutively. Now when editing in Premiere, we've got a couple of options here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edit the bike clip number 1 in the timeline. Now I can do this by simply putting my cursor over the edge and dragging and snapping. By default, you'll see on the inside of the timeline there is a horseshoe magnet that is highlighted in blue, which means the snap is automatically on. Now you're welcome to use your shift key just as in After Effects. It makes it a little bit more pronounced, but it's there by default. So I can click and drag to edit, or I can double click on the clip in question and it will appear in the upper left hand corner in the source window. And in here I can go in and I can set an in and out point by dragging on the playback head and clicking on these two mark in, mark out brackets that you see at the far left hand side of the toolbar inside the source window. So if I were to click there, you'll see it updates in my timeline. If I wanted to put an out point on that, I could drag, and once I found the out point, I could click on the mark out bracket, and you'll see the gaps that are left inside the timeline. It's easy to get rid of these gaps. I'll right click in between the space that was edited out and the clip itself, and I'll click on Ripple Delete, and I'll do the same here. Now in addition to just editing out content, Premiere gives us the basic transitions that we're accustomed to in After Effects. In the context of this project, maybe in the long version of your final movie, you may want to use transitions, but there's something you're going to stay away from when you do the 6-second and the 15-second versions, the bumper videos that accompany the long video that you'll create first. So let's take a look at those transitions. Now they're going to show up in the lower left-hand corner, and there's a number of windows that occupy the lower left-hand corner. So what Premiere has done is giving us this little tab up here, these little arrowheads. When I click on there, I can see there's my project folder, and now here are my effects. And that's where I would go out and get my video transitions or audio transitions if I were going to use them. Now if in the event it does not appear in the lower left-hand corner, just like in all the Adobe products, you would go to Window to find the window you want, and about halfway down you'll see the word Effects. I'm going to put my playback head randomly between two clips, and I'm going to go to the video transitions. So I'll open video transitions, and I'm just going to go with a basic dissolve here. A lot of them are kind of tacky. We've talked about how tasteless those can be in the context of a bad wedding video. So I'm simply going to choose an additive dissolve, which will give me bright light between the clips. I'm going to click and drag it between the two clips in question. And it's telling me insufficient media, but it's going to apply it anyway. So now I'll just double click on that. And in this window, I can change the duration. Maybe I'll make it 2 seconds. I'll hit return. And I'm going to zoom in on this so I can see a little bit more clearly. Just like in After Effects, I can hit plus on the keyboard. Now I can extend the transition right in the timeline, like so. And I can move it to use more of one clip than the other. And also make these changes to this dissolve that I've just introduced, this transition, by going to the left-hand corner in the source window. And if I were to click on Effect Control, after selecting it, it's going to show me that transition. Now I also have the option to see the actual footage. So I'll click on the checkbox at the far right-hand side of the word Show Actual Sources, and now I can see the clips involved here, the in and out point of each clip. So I've got the option of moving this around and changing the in and out point here as well. If I wanted to preview this in real time, I'd need to put an in and out point, not unlike what we do with the work area bar in After Effects. I'll put my playback head a little bit before the beginning of the transition, hit I, and then I'll drag it a little bit past the transition and hit O. Tap my space bar to preview that change. Now in the timeline, we have the option to introduce our own voiceovers. So after you've done your video, if the audio wasn't quite what you expected or you had planned on doing a voiceover, you can do that right inside Premiere. I've muted the original audio file that appears in my timeline. You'll see that this M appears. And that's going to allow me to record and then play it back so you can kind of see how easy it is to do so. So I'm going to select audio number 2. Now let's put my playback head perhaps near this transition. And now if I was to click on the microphone, it counts down to 3. And then now I'm going to record my voice, and this is a bicycle race. And click off on it. And you'll see now in your timeline that audio file has been introduced. And then now I'm going to record my voice, and this is a bicycle race. So you can see how easy it is to do your voiceover after you've got your footage set up the way you want. Now once you have all your edits done and your voiceover in the way you may want it to be, you'll want to export your final movie. I'm going to right click in the timeline where I had placed this in and out point to preview that transition, and when I right click I'll see the option to clear the in and out point. We're going to use the in and out point function to define the movie we want to export. I'm going to go to the end of my clips, and I can shift and snap there, or I can use the down arrow to navigate to the existing edit points in my movie. And now I will hit O on the keyboard, and you'll see now that it's been cleared, it sets my parameters from the beginning of my timeline through to where I had set the playback head. Now I'm ready to make that movie. I can either go up to File, Export Media, or I can hit Command M on the keyboard. And the media encoder launches. And I want to check to make sure that that sequence in and out is in the source range. Very often it might come up with entire sequence. I've set the in and out point, and that's all I want. Just like in After Effects, if you don't set that in and out point exactly where you want and choose it in this window while you're in Premiere, it'll export your entire timeline. Now I'm going to go over and I'm going to choose the format, and I've chosen H.264. I'm going to go to where it says Output Name in blue. Just like in After Effects, that blue tells us that we can edit this point. In this case, this is going to be to direct our final movie into our project folder. Save it. And depending on which version you're working on, now very often the final movie, the long version, any version for that matter, is going to probably end up on YouTube. But the smaller versions, it might be Snapchat or some other social media site. You do have the option down here now, if you wanted to change the frame rate. And very often I'll drop it down to 15 or 12 or 10 even, because it's not going to have an effect on the quality of the audio file. So in this case, it'll make your video much smaller. You're going to find, though, that as you start to post these videos on Vimeo or on YouTube, they take care of the compression for you. As long as you've chosen H.264, streaming media sites will compress your files for you. So once I've got the settings I want, I'll click on Export. And there's our final movie.